चलिए।
नमस्ते सुनील जी।
नमस्कार सर।
दिल्ली के हमारे दोस्त ने बताया बहुत धमाका हुआ था।
अरे अच्छा।
हाँ।
ओह, हमें यहाँ महसूस नहीं हुआ सर। अच्छा, खैर शुरू करते हैं। ओ सहना भवतु सहनो भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ओम शांति शांति शांति।
Namaste. So we are beginning from 6.18. So will you start, sir? Okay. So shall we start? Yada viniyatam chittam atmani eva avatishtate nispruha sarva kamebhyo yukta iti uchyate tada. So this last time we were talking about yukta ahar, vihar, achar. And so now this, okay, sorry, I'll read the English version. When the mind, which is thoroughly disciplined, gets riveted on God alone, then the person who is free from yearning for all enjoyments is said to be established in yoga. So last time we were talking about the activities of the day which have to be kept in control. So here it says that when the mind is thus disciplined, it to be so this kind of a mind is balanced in all the activities of the day, also in the food, in the amount of energy which is expended, in the recreation. So there is balance in every activity of life. So yeah, so this is what the verse says. So also we can take it as we can do everything in life. We eat, we sleep, we have some recreation, we work, but everything has to be balanced. That also, but everything is done, but the mind is fixed on one objective, on God. And keep this balance. Otherwise, it's very easy for the senses to get swayed. So this is what we can understand from this verse. So if we have some questions or we can some thoughts, otherwise we can move on.
I think Bhupatkar sir was saying something.
Okay, we'll wait.
There is a problem, it looks like.
Okay.
Oh,
Now,
okay. You're visible now, sir.
प्रतिष्ठते स्पृहः सर्वकामेषु युक्त इत्युच्यते तत्.
Yes. So, sir, that's what we just discussed, that uh, when the mind is involved in all activities of the day, but it's fixed on one particular goal, and then it doesn't get swayed. It's in a balanced state of mind. So one is
No.
eating food, but the mind is fixed on God. So we have finished discussing this verse. He has something to say, or any questions on this? Otherwise, we can move on to the next verse. Okay, we'll read the next verse. Yatha deepo nivatasto ne ingate supama smrita yogino yata chittasya yunjato yogam atmanah. So now it says there is a comparison of such a mind which is steady. It's like a flame in a windless place. A lamp, the flame of the lamp does not move in a windless place. It is so steady. And so similarly, the yogi's mind is also steady, though it is amidst all these material objects and material activities. So now we have the flame, we have the lamp, we have the flame, we have a windless place. And as long as there is oil in the lamp, the flame is active. And yeah, so can we compare our minds to that? Can our mind be steady amidst all objects of the world? Amidst food, amidst too much of activity, amidst recreation, amidst sleep? Can we also be steady like a lamp in a windless place? And what does a windless place mean? What would we understand by a windless place where there is no wind? But how do we compare it with the mind?
So an unwavering mind.
Yeah, a mind which has no thoughts, basically. See, the thoughts are the ones which make the mind move. So when there are no thoughts in the mind, so can we achieve such a thoughtless state where there are no thoughts, and then we can be like the yogi whose mind is steady, or then we can be like a lamp whose flame is steady? The thoughts are compared to the wind. When there are no thoughts, it's said to be a windless place. And then the inner flame is steady. And then there is clarity. There is no falling back. There is continuous clarity. So, sir is saying that he's not able to hear anything today.
Because of maybe
Yeah.
connectivity. Yeah, that's probably
Yeah.
most likely.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is just about awareness. There's just, of course, one is alive. There is awareness, but there are no thoughts. One is as if fixed on one's goal. There is total clarity. One knows what one has to do, and one is just simply doing that. So, any thoughts?
So I think these are the clished, tendencies which basically drive them to keep functioning and wavering. So to reach the state, I think the whole path of yoga, which is to basically diminish the uh, klishta vrittis, I think that becomes relevant here.
So, the vrittis are of two types, klishta and aklishta. You see, the vrittis don't have to be there. So, I don't think it is much about klishta, but it can be klishta or aklishta. There have to be no vrittis. There is no desire to do good or bad.
Hmm.
It's totally a thoughtless state. So in the thoughtless state, we can't even have aklishta vrittis. They're the one which makes the mind move. So they can be of two types. So both of them are not there. It is merely the awareness, just the awareness, constant awareness of the life principle. There is just consciousness. So this thing comes to mind of Kabir. Kabir says, "Jab मैं था तब हरि नहीं, प्रेम गली अति सांकरी, तामे दो न समाए." दो नहीं समाएंगे, एक ही वो अवेयरनेस होगी, मैं तो बिल्कुल नहीं हूँ. So there is nothing, just the awareness principle. Yeah, so
Yeah,
there
very
is,
true. That's very well put by Sant Kabir. That's
Yeah.
exactly what it is. Till you are there,
yes,
you know, it's difficult for God to find a place in
Yeah.
your heart.
yeah. So
So,
he said, Prem Gali Ati Sankari. It's so narrow that only one fits there. So then only can there be steadiness. Okay. Mahindra sir, anything to say? So shall we move on? Okay. Yatro paramate chittam nidam yoga siddhaya yatra atmana pashyati atmani tushyati. So now this says that the state in which the chitta, subdued through the practice of yoga, becomes completely tranquil, and in which realizing God through subtle reasoning, purified by meditation on God, the soul rejoices only in God. So it says here that chittam is nirudham. So the chitta is restrained through the practice of yoga, and it is established in the self, and so it is tranquil. The word is tushyati. So in this stage, one does not have any other sensation. One is totally established in God. It's a state of high contentment. And there is nothing, there is no other attraction left. So since there is no other attraction, there is no movement in the mind, there is no distraction, there is no other attraction. One is totally established in oneself, and one is totally tranquil. There is peace, there is no movement, there is absolute tranquility. So now this would be a matter of experience. Obviously, we can just discuss about it, but it is a stage very high where one has to experience that stage of no sensation in the mind. There is just no sense movement. The sensations have no effect. There is perfect peace, tranquility, no movement, awareness of everything around. So now what happens in this state is that sukham atyatikam yatta buddhiya graho ati indriyan. Sorry, I'll read from this book. Ati indriyam veti yatra na chevayam sthithas chalati tatvatah. So this is a state in which the soul experiences the eternal and supersensuous joy, which is imputed only through the subtle and purified intellect, and wherein established, the yogi moves not from truth on any account. So these are the descriptions. So it says the sukham atyantikam. There is infinite bliss, sukham. Because there is no movement, the yogi is kind of established in that kind of a peace. Now, often we must have experienced this kind of a peaceful state, maybe after a prolonged practice of sukhasana or any such meditative pose. There could be an experience of absolute calmness and peace. So, can we say that we have achieved samadhi? That peace is kind of occasional. So when peace is sudden, when it never moves, when the mind never moves from that peaceful state, when there is no, then one is kind of said to be established in that reality. So maybe we can keep a check in our mind that we can attain the peaceful state, and we do attain it sometimes, but how does it go away? And why does it go? And why doesn't it remain for long? So these could be the questions. And can we consciously bring about the state often in a day, or at least once a day, and try to be consciously in that state for as long as possible?
So these verses, incidentally, I feel are the kind of equivalent of the verses Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha Tada Drishtu Swarupe Avasthana. Right? I think that's is the equivalent here.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
So I think, so really though it's almost an obvious thing, for to move towards this, we really have to, work from both ends. That is from the yoga end, which is continuous practice, and from the Sankhya end, which is improved understanding.
The theory.
Yes. So you can say the theory, the concept, the understanding, the appreciation of the whole structure of reality.
Yeah.
Because once we understand that well, it shows that look, most of what we run after is a mirage, right? So
Yeah.
there is there's no utility, there's no fun at the end of it, and experientially also we see that time and again.
Yeah.
There are so many things in life that we have been pushing after, and those have more or less disappointed by the end of it. So but the important thing is that on the one hand, abhyas through the yogic side, and vairagya from the, again, there is a parallel to chapter 1 of sutra. So when both of these kind of come together, I think that's when we can progress towards this state.
Yeah. So there is an important point also which he makes in this stanza, it says that it's beyond transcending the senses, ati indriyam, and then only can the intellect grasp it. It is definitely a matter of experience. One has to continuously practice, reflect over the theory part, and practice. Yeah. So these are the verses which we can read through, and of course dwell on them in the free time. And basically this is what comes out of that Yukta Ahar Vihar Achar Vichar. So our daily routine can be kind of molded in such a way that the mind is more and more calm and in a different kind of a state, in a higher state. So we can go to the next verse. So Ashutosh sir is
So is the connection stable now?
so we can see you now, but you're
Somewhat,
on mute.
somewhat.
Yeah. Okay.
Sir, can you read 6.22?
Yes, I can. Should I?
Yes.
Yes, please.
यम लब्ध्वा चापरं लाभं मन्यते नाधिकं ततः यस्मिन् स्थितो न दुःखेन गुरुणापि विचाल्यते.
So it says, and having obtained which he does not reckon any other gain greater than that, and established in which he is not shaken even by the heaviest of sorrows. So this is the ultimate. So when you get this, when you are totally established in that God consciousness, then that person is not shaken by anything. The heaviest of sorrows. So sorrow is kind of a distraction. In the Yoga Sutra, sorrow is a distraction. There is nothing which moves this kind of an individual who's totally established in God consciousness. So there is no pain idea, there is no distraction, there is no attraction, nothing. One has reached the highest. It's a continuous bliss. It's a continuous peaceful state, a continuous clear state where one understands everything and one understands that this pain is of the material world. There is no pain. When there is in that God consciousness, there is no pain. So he's not moved by the heaviest of sorrows of the material world because he knows it's all changing, it's all temporary. So,
Ashaji,
yes.
if you see the translations of 19, 20, 19 and 20 especially,
Yeah.
18, 19 and 20,
Yeah.
the word Atman has been translated as God, which is not a very correct thing.
Okay.
Yeah. In the
So
translation, I'm
we
talking
could
about the English
tap
translation.
in oneself.
Because yoga is not talking here, the yoga is talking about Atman. It is not also talking about Paramatman. It is only talking about Atman. So in
Yeah.
that case, the translation of God is absolutely incorrect. That's what I think.
Okay.
Yeah, true.
Fine. So we can
Because if you say you are concentrating on God, then you are concentrating on something outside of you, perhaps. Whereas that is not what is intended in the verse itself.
True. True, sir.
Yeah, very
Yes.
true.
Maybe if we just have to explain to a layman, if we could use God. Now, God can be formless, established within oneself. The Yoga Sutra says that whenever you are thinking of God or you meditate, the one thing could be you meditate on God within you in your heart. So you could meditate on some form or some name of God. So now eventually that goes away and there is just that steadiness. Then there is no name, nothing, there is a quiet state. So we spoke about awareness. In that awareness, there's just an awareness of the higher self. There is just the awareness. That is what also I mentioned. So,
Yeah,
how,
but the word that is used in
yeah,
20,
agree.
verse 20
Yeah,
is Pashyan.
Pashyan, seeing.
Yatra Saiva Atmana Atmanam Pashyan.
Yeah,
Pashyan means you
seeing,
actually see it.
see
Yeah.
God. Yeah.
So it is such a powerful awareness that you
Yes,
actually can see
yes.
see and feel it.
True. Yeah, true. So Vivekananda is asking Sri Ramakrishna, have you seen God? He says, yes, I see him as clearly as I see you.
Right.
Yeah. So now these are stages, very high stages. We can only understand them by examples at the moment. And then one understands them in the right perspective. Yes, sir, you're right. You see, or you
Yeah.
just see the awareness all the time, 24/7. It never leaves you. So there is constant clarity. Okay, so we are on verse 23 now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tam vidya dukha sanyoga viyogam yoga samjnitam tanischayena yoktavyo yogo nirbinna chetasa.
So it says that state called yoga, which is free from the contact of sorrow, should be known. Hey, this yoga should be resolutely practiced with an unwearied mind. Here, there is a different definition of yoga. What is called yoga? Which is free from the contact of sorrow. Yoga, a state of severance from the union with pain. So then there is just no pain. And there is one practices this with an unwearied mind. That again is a important thing. One doesn't lose hope, one doesn't lose faith, one continues on the path till one acquires that steadiness. So on the path of spirituality, the yogis do experience the dark nights when there is total loss of faith, or there is kind of one could get frustrated because it's difficult to reach the goal. I had seen this documentary on Mount Everest, and that was the time I could relate very clearly with this shloka. This person goes up on the mountain, up. His the person who's accompanying him also is not there. He also falls down midway. And when he reaches the top, the last few steps to reach the summit are so difficult. For him to lift up one leg and move one leg forward is also difficult. The oxygen level is so low over there. To reach that peak is a very tough job. He's reached almost there. He's just a few, steps ahead. But those last few steps are also so difficult. And then finally he reaches there. So it can get very difficult. And he said, with an unwearied mind, with an undespairing mind, he has to continuously practice and reach that state. So this is what it says. And then what is promised is a permanent kind of a promise. One established in that bliss, one never, not even the heaviest of sorrows moves one from that kind of a state, from that blissful state. But to reach there is a difficult proposition. So shall we move on, sir? Or any questions? Any thoughts?
Incidentally, sorry.
Sorry.
Yes. No, please go on.
This shloka can be taken as one of the definitions?
Yeah, one of the definitions of yoga, freedom from
Yes.
pain.
Yeah, because here it is clearly calling it as a state which is named
Yeah.
as yoga.
Yeah, definition of yoga is totally different in this verse.
I would say it should be freedom.
Yes.
It should be freedom from suffering. Not pain. Like we had visited the Ramanashram, right, in the Tiruvannamalai. And so we were talking to this gentleman, Mr. Ramanan, who is the nephew of Ramana Maharshi. And so we're just asking him about the final days, because everybody knows that Ramana Maharshi had cancer at the end. And it was a very difficult, seemingly very difficult time. So it's like, how was that handled, etc. So he said very matter-of-factly, he said there was pain, but no suffering.
No suffering. Yeah.
Because, of course, due to his elevated state, he must have ceased to identify with that. Right. So
clarity probably in that state.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
because then the difference between the body and the consciousness is so clear. You understand that the suffering is only physical and it's temporary, it's going to
end. And also, mind you, a yogic siddha, especially a siddha, is not a jad kind of person, is not an unfeeling person, is not an insensitive person. On the contrary, he or she is an extremely sensitive person. So it is not such that a person cannot feel the pain. He can intensely feel the pain.
Yeah.
But because of the clarity, there is no suffering on account of that. Once, sees that also as something which comes and will go away. It's, kind of transient in nature.
Paramita can separate the milk from the water. We are able to understand the difference. See, you see the pain, but the clarity is there continuously that these are two different things. The pain is there. Definitely, I feel the pain. But then I'm so absorbed in that consciousness that pain is there, one part of it, but I'm totally established in the real self. Well,
So I
these are
don't.
kinds of experience we can
Yes.
discuss about these, yeah. So we can go on to 6.24.
Sunilji, so dukkha here is pain or suffering?
So I cannot say with authority, but I feel here dukkha would remain as dukkha, because suffering is it's something that is happens or doesn't happen as a result of dukkha. So the very nature of sansar is dukkha. At the end of the day, it yields pain for the simple reason that we are engaging with the sansar in a manner which is not in consonance with its true asitva. We are dealing with the sansar as if it's permanent, whereas its true nature is transience. So our whole manner of engagement itself is faulty. So therefore, it's bound to yield dukkha. But whether that dukkha yields in us suffering or otherwise is something that's not a function of sansar. It's a function of our own self. In fact, there again, Ramana Maharshi is reputed to have said that you really have very little control or no control over what happens in the world outside. The only control you have is in terms of how you respond or react to it. So this dukkha is, I believe, dukkha itself.
Because this term, this term is very peculiar. Dukkha sanyoga viyogam.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yes.
maybe one can dukkha, as you rightly said, is part of the existence when we think of the world as permanent. So
Correct.
that is
Absolutely.
sanyoga, dukkha sanyoga.
Yes.
And
Yes.
when we completely give it up, then it is dukkha sanyoga viyogam.
Right.
Yeah.
Very true. I think so. You're right.
I think it's a very peculiar term. Very peculiar. Yeah.
Both the term and its opposite are present in the together.
Yeah,
So
right.
that's
Absolutely.
rare. That's
Beauty.
rare.
That's the beauty of
Yeah,
it.
that's a beauty.
Yeah.
So now we can connect it to Karma Yoga. As in, if you look at it, when Sita was abducted, Ram did feel the, but you don't allow the union to be so complete that your mind is carried away. Your mind is totally under the sway of pain. So you do experience the pain, but the clarity is there, and you do the necessary action. So anytime when there is pain, but you don't come under the sway of pain that you forget to do the right action in life. Even a normal human being goes through so much of pain in life. There could be a death in the family, there could be loss of money, loss of business. There could be so many kinds of pain. But in that pain, if he does experience the pain, but he doesn't allow the pain to overpower him, but he continues to do what is necessary in life, then also I think one has reached a good state in life. One has learned to live life. And we have in the beginning shared these examples of, Sir Ashutosh, sir, you only shared the example of some professor or some vice principal of some college who lost his wife and then he continued with
Right.
his. So you don't allow the pain to overpower you. There is the union of pain is not there. Complete union of pain, where you're totally under the pain, overpowered by the pain, where you've lost your mind and you don't know what to do and you're in a helpless state or in a disturbed state. So we don't allow the disturbance to come. Pain is a disturbance, a distraction. So this is what this would also mean.
So it's virtually a state of suffering or a state of sorrow that has been described as dukkha.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of the sutra that will slightly may clarify.
Yeah.
Maitri karuna mudita upeksha
Yeah.
punya punna chitta prasadanam.
Yeah. Chitta prasadana.
Chitta prasad. So dukkha is ultimately the state of mind.
Yeah.
Now this state of mind is to be is not to be there, in fact. So state of suffering or sorrow has been described as a dukkha as far as this is concerned.
Yeah.
Right.
The technique is karuna, right? So that sukha, maitri, karuna, mudita, upekshana, sukha, dukkha, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it comes with karuna. Karuna for another person's pain. So there is no pain or no sorrow. Now these would be, now we can just go into discussions of what is pain, what is suffering, what is sorrow.
Yeah,
But the mind is in a quiet state and the mind is not disturbed, and you can carry on your day-to-day duties in a correct fashion. So if we can look at it from the practical point of view, I think that would be a good thing. And even if it is somebody else's sorrow, there is karuna. Karuna is kind of an empathy, a kind of action where you're not emotionally carried away by the other person's suffering and you don't do wrong things. Now you see somebody suffering, but I mean, what can you do? You can just be silent and be compassionate. You can't really alleviate somebody else's pain. You can be there for the person, but beyond that, what can anybody do? So this kind of an emotional distancing through any kind of sorrow or pain, that would what would mean.
Yes, that is true. In fact, one can do what one can.
Yes.
In a situation, but then one has to remain stable enough and not get carried away.
Correct.
Right? In fact, so that one is in a position to do something.
Yeah.
See, somebody else is ill and you also get, panicky. Then whatever little you could do to help that person come out of illness also you can't do.
So that constant distancing.
Yes.
This is what the Bhagavad Gita is telling us.
So in a nutshell, whatever state is there, if we can maintain our sanity in whatever situation it is there, whatever situation, right, wrong, good, bad, two opposites, if we are even in the worst situations and we maintain our sanity, it is likely that we find a solution to come out of that situation. I think that's what is contemplated here.
Right.
That you don't, yeah. So if you are in pain, you're there. Basically, if there is union with pain, basically gone back into the material world. The awareness lost. So this is what these few verses are saying. When you're in constant awareness of that, so you may name it as God principle, as Atma, as Paramatma, as anything, but that distancing is there.
Yeah.
There is no union. There is no loss of clarity. And he says this in this previous verse, that it is beyond the senses. It can be grasped by the intellect, an intellect which is pure. He said that in verse 21. All right, so shall we move to 6.24?
Yes.
So you're on mute, sir. Sankalpa Prabhavan. Sankalpa Prabhavan Kamans Tyaktava Sarva Asheshata Manasav Eva Indriya Gramam Viniyamya Samantata. Okay, so now this verse says, completely renouncing all desires arising from sankalpas and fully restraining all the senses from all sides by the mind. We go on to the next verse. Shanay, Shanay.
Okay. शनैः शनैः उपरमेत् धृतिगृहीतया आत्मसंस्थं मनः कृत्वा न किञ्चिदपि चिन्तयेत्.
He should gradually practice, attain tranquility, and fixing the mind on God through reason, controlled by steadfastness, he should not think of anything else. So now again, he's stressing the same thing, that first desires arising out of thoughts. They have to be, yeah. And then through gradual practice, one attains tranquility, fixing the mind on God through reason, controlled by steadfastness. He's so steady, he's not at all swayed by anything. His mind is on God, and he does not think of anything else. This last sentence, na kinchita apachitaye, of verse 25, that now Sri Aurobindo, I had read about, he had maintained a record of yoga for quite a few years. And every day in his diary, he used to write about his practice of yoga, what he had achieved on that day, his state of mind. And he writes a whole essay on this. It is entitled Na Kinchita Api Chintayet. Not think of anything else. Now, slowly, like a child, one goes on kind of changing the mindset. One goes on putting the mind on a higher objective and continuously does not allow anything else besides that objective to be in the mind. We will be talking about Abhyas and Vairagya in this very chapter, where through constant practice, the mind is fixed on one objective. And one does not think of anything else. Na kinchita api chintayet.
But
Yes.
what the verse says is na kinchidapi chintayet. It is not anything. It's saying anything.
Sorry.
Na kinchidapi chintayet. Do not think of anything.
Yeah.
Think of anything. That's what it says. Not do not think of anything.
Do not think of anything. Yes. Correct.
But
so
the translation is anything.
Correct. It's beyond the thought also. It's beyond the thought. There is just awareness. At the moment we begin Shanay, when he says slowly, initially there would be an object, and beyond, after that, there is no thought even of that object. One is totally merged into it. Yes, you're right in that way. It does not think of anything, not else, but anything.
So, would this be, you begin with dharana,
Yeah.
contemplation, concentration upon, and then slowly move into dhyan.
That will happen as a gradual process.
As a gradual, and almost as a automatically.
True.
Progressively.
In the Pratyahar part also he says, restraining the senses from all sides. So sankalpa, there are no desires, there is no thought, there are no decisions to be made, mental decisions. I am going to do this, I am going to do that. Nothing. Slowly, all the sankalps also go away. Initially, you start with that. Initially, you start with the right decisions. And finally, then one is just into it. Then there is no question of any kind of sankalpa, thought. Then everything is resigned to the ultimate. Okay.
Is there any significance of dhairya yukta buddhi?
Where is that?
In verse 25,
Huh?
Dhriti is courage, no? Yeah.
Firmness.
so also I think it's a
It's firm. The intellect is
the intellect is firm, right?
yeah, that's what it says.
Right. Unwavering again. Yeah.
Unwavering kind of an intellect. See, even in the material world, if one has an objective and one is constantly focused firmly on that objective, then all other things have to follow. Whatever is required for that goal, one keeps only those kind of things.
True.
So these are verses to be contemplated upon. This is a chapter on meditation. With slowly through practice, the intellect is held firm, steadfast, and one does not think. Eventually, one does not think of anything. Eventually, there is no thought. Okay, so shall we move on to the verse?
Yato yato nischarati manashchanchalam astiram tatastad atmaiva vashan nayet.
So drawing back the restless and fidgety mind from all those objects after which it runs, he should repeatedly Atmani. So now God is just used as a word. It can be you can take it as Atman or anything, but the point is not that. The point is that you draw back the restless and the fidgety mind. Slowly take it away from whatever it is running after. Now he's telling this verse to Arjun. Arjun is that kind of a mind when in his childhood days, Arjun is asked by Dronacharya when they are all shooting Dronacharya is instructing all the children to shoot the eye of the bird, which is perched on a tree. It's only Arjun who says, I can't see anything else except the eye of the bird. All the other children say, I see the flowers, I see the tree, I see the sky, I see the branches. So draw back that restless mind and fix it on one objective. So we can term it as self-development. When I have decided to develop myself, then I don't give in to anger, I don't give in to laziness, I don't give in to so many kind of distractions. I don't give in to overeating or whatever, so many things. I go on keeping that thing fixed in my mind that I have to improve myself. I have to raise myself, lift myself to a higher state. Whatever is going to pull me down has to be given up. So this kind of thing, we all know. What is it that makes my mind disturbed? What is it that takes? What is it that disturbs my mind? How is it that I lose my good state of mind? How is it that we can begin with the body? How is it that my body becomes kind of lethargic when I overeat, when I sleep too much, when I watching too much of TV, so many things. Like, it's so individual. Everybody has different weaknesses because of which the body gets into a lethargic state and the mind also gets into a lethargic state. One is not able to do what one has decided. Now, these are higher sankalps, higher decisions we are talking about, good decisions, but day-to-day decisions, when we are not able to carry out what we have decided, it happens in all our lives. So we can begin from that kind of a state where we draw back the restless and fidgety mind from all those objects after which it runs. And he says he should repeatedly fix it on God. So we can read verse 27. Prashanta manasam yenam yoginam sukham uttamam upayati shanta rajasam brahma bhutam klamasham. For to the yogi whose mind is perfectly serene, prashanta manasam, who's sinless, whose passion is subdued, and who's identified with Brahma, the embodiment of truth, knowledge and bliss, supreme comes as a matter of course. So we're repeating the same thought process. The yogi whose mind is perfectly serene, whose passions are subdued, he attains the supreme happiness comes as a matter of course. He doesn't have to do anything for it. It just happens. Just some word. We have the MD of Parley Products, Sharad Bhai Chavan, coming to the Yoga Institute. Okay, now Sharad Bhai, if you see him, he looks like a very ordinary person. And if he's with a group of people, unknown people, and they ask him, I have heard him, we've been in a group, and somebody has just asked him, कि, आप क्या करते हैं? So he says, हम टॉफी बनाते हैं. So he never says that he owns Parley Products, which runs into crores of rupees. So he does the back cover of the journal of Yoga and Total Health, and a lot of reflection on the Bhagavad Gita, and he picks up these words. So one of the words was Shant Rajasam, and he depicts this Shant Rajasam. So this came on the back cover, just this word and corresponding kind of a work with it. So that's his pastime, and every month he sends me the back cover with some phrase of the Bhagavad Gita, like Prashanta Manasam, Shant Rajasam. So this Shant Rajasam is in my mind, fixed in my mind, where the passions are subdued, where there is no agitation in the mind. Shant Rajasam. Or if there is agitation, then I remind myself Shant Rajasam. So, these kind of just the words from the Bhagavad Gita, maybe not the full shloka, but just these particular words, they come handy at certain moments of life. So this Shanta Rajasam is there, one whose passion is quietened. So when that passion is there, when the Rajas is active, obviously Sattva has taken a back seat. And when the Rajas is Shant, there is clarity, there is Sattva, there is light. And there is Sukham Uttamam. So yeah, any other thoughts on this? Sir, you're on mute, sir. Shall we go on to the next? Yeah.
No, what the translation says is Brahma is comprising truth, knowledge, and bliss.
Yes.
So I don't know from where these ideas have come.
That's Sachidanand.
No, but Jnana is not chit. Knowledge is knowledge cannot be said to be chit, no?
Really? Ah.
So it can
embodiment of truth, knowledge, and bliss.
So he's aware of the real thing. There is total unwavering knowledge of the real.
Yeah.
There is bliss.
Yeah, but chit is knowledge. Are you saying chit is equivalent to knowledge?
But where is the word chitta used in the shloka?
No, it is not used there. That's what I'm asking. From
Ah.
where this idea of Brahma as truth, knowledge, and bliss. So
Okay.
Sunil Bhai is saying perhaps it has a connection with Satchidanand, which I can, yes, it looks like that way. But Brahma Bhutam Akalmashaha.
Yeah,
Brahma.
because
He becomes Brahma.
Akalmashaha.
Now they have described Brahma. So
Yeah.
now somebody's description of Brahma will be, one has to experience it to describe it. Anyway, so we shall go on to the next verse.
see, the Hindi translation, which I am kind of working with as we
Oh, I see. Okay, okay.
that also now I noticed when I said that it did not strike me, but then I noticed it says जिसका रजोगुण शांत हो गया है ऐसे इस सच्चिदानंद घन ब्रह्म के साथ एक ही भाव हुए योगी को उत्तम आनंद प्राप्त होता है. So he may be referring to one of the qualities. This may not be written exactly in the words, but translator from his own
Right.
has
Yeah.
taken the
Right.
connotation of Satchidanand as a
Okay.
quality of Brahma.
Yeah. So since we are not the first timers to the Bhagavad Gita, we can overlook these kind of translations.
No, no, we can overlook. That's not a problem. We can
Yeah.
overlook whatever he says. And of course, we can have our own interpretation.
Yes, yes,
That's-
sure.
Yeah.
Like Devdutt Patnaik says, my Gita.
But the point is, the point is that there are, like my brother-in-law in US,
Yeah.
he relies entirely on translation because he doesn't understand Sanskrit at all.
Yeah.
So then it will create a problem,
Yeah.
especially for our second, third generation Indian diaspora who is settled abroad, who rely entirely on translations. This is that will create a problem.
Yeah, but the one who really wants to pursue it does find the proper teacher and the proper source. So since we are on
So
that
are you saying that then any kind of incorrect translation should do?
So I'm just just last month, my niece is 24 years old, and she came home last month, and she got this book, My Gita by Devdutt Patnaik, and then she gave it to my daughter. Okay, and then so I said, hey, how did you get interested in this book? So she says, my nani passed away, and we had a Bhagavad Gita chanting for 14 days, 12 days, and so she said, I got interested in this, and then I purchased this book. I went online and I got this book. So now she had just heard chanting, and apparently her mommy is into Bhagavad Gita, and then she told me all this. So I said, Acha, so just by chanting you got interested? She said, yeah. I said, okay. Then I said, okay, then what did you understand from the book? So then she was at a total loss, no answer. So then she says, we have to do our duty. So I said, okay. So then after 3-4 minutes, after a long pause, she comes to me and she says, but our whole life goes in understanding what is to be done. I said, okay. So then she said, now, are you going to read it again? So she says, no, I'm not going to read it again. I'm going to take another philosophical book because now I'm interested in philosophy. She's a CA. She's trying to get admission in the IIM. She's a very bright student. And so these kind of children also who are getting interested in philosophy and they are moving on from one book to another, finally they will reach somewhere. So I don't think it's wrong to enter any kind of translation because finally you will come to the right kind of a source. So when I spoke to this particular child, she's quite an intelligent child. And my daughter didn't read a word of it. She just took the book and kept it. So it's a matter. Can't force anybody, but the ones who really are interested will reach the right. This is my thinking.
Yeah, that's true. But of course, we must facilitate that. The person should be able to do that more easily
Yeah.
than otherwise.
Yeah.
So in that sense, when we are, of course, in translations, each translator, and that holds true for every and every text, puts his or her own interpretation onto the verse, no doubt about it. So whatever translation we use, and that's immaterial, but yes, like we are doing, we are correlating always with the practical aspect.
Right.
So we continue to interweave what's stated exactly in the verse,
Yeah.
right? So translation errors, yes, we can acknowledge, which we are doing.
Yeah.
But since we keep interweaving, any errors that a translator is making will not affect our progress.
True. And also, I think a lot of people are going by the Chinmaya Mission Bhagavad Gita translation, which is very good. We at the Yoga Institute bought this book by the Gita Press because it's only about 22 rupees. It's the cheapest book available. So it's handy for non-profit organizations. It was so cheap.
But Sunil bhai, error is one thing. Error is one thing and mischief is another. Yeah. And we know very well that translators can also do mischief.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's why we are careful.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, absolutely, sir. I mean, no two ways about it. Yeah, they can do mischief.
Because at the end of it, there is also a sociology of these scriptures. And there is a social dynamics at work.
Yeah. True.
And some people are trying to exercise power over others through the scriptures. And this happens in every religion.
Yeah.
And therefore, there are people who go by the scriptural meaning, and there are people who go by the experience meaning.
Yeah.
And I think Gita is all the time saying that you try to correlate your own experience.
True.
Yeah. So it's talking about manas, it is talking about buddhi, it is talking about chitta. And then if this translation talks about something else, then I think we have to be very careful about it.
Yeah.
Very true.
Okay. So we'll go on to verse 28, sir.
Yes, please.
Minutes.
Yunjan evam sadatmanam yogi vigata kalmashaha sukhena brahma samsparsham atyantam sukham ashnute.
Yeah. So it says the sinless yogi, thus uniting himself constantly with God, easily enjoys the eternal bliss of oneness with Brahma. So it's easy for him. The word sukha is used twice in this verse. Sukhena Brahma Sansparsha and Sukham Ashnut. He enjoys the bliss easily. So we can go on to the next verse, since this verse doesn't need much of explanation.
Sarva bhutastham atmanam sarva bhutani chatmani ikshate yoga yuktatma sarvatra samadarshanaha. Yeah.
So the yogi who is united in identity with the all-pervading infinite consciousness, whose vision everywhere is even, beholds a self existing in all beings, and all beings as assumed in the self. So there is total awareness. He never loses his awareness. So he sees he's aware of the consciousness. The consciousness principle is there in everything. He sees it all the time. He's never lost to it. He's immersed in that consciousness. It's there all the time. He sees it in all beings, in himself, and in everything around him. Everything around him is due to the consciousness. That's never lost to him. So this is the experience of the one who's united with consciousness. It's never lost to him. So if we don't need to discuss this, we can go to the next verse.
Yo mam pashyati sarvatra sarvancha mai pashyati
तस्याहं प्रणश्यामि स च मे न प्रणश्यति.
He who sees me present in all beings, all beings existing within me, he is never lost to me, nor am I ever lost to him. The consciousness is there all the time. I don't lose it. It never loses me. So we can go in the next verse.
सर्वभूतस्थितं यो मां भजत्येकत्वमास्थितः सर्वथा वर्तमानोऽपि स योगी मयि वर्तते.
Yeah. The yogi who established in union with me and worships me as dwelling in all beings as their very self, whatever activities he performs them in me. So basically, the consciousness is never lost. It's there all the time. And everything is done with that awareness.
Shall we go to the next? Yeah.
Yes, sure.
आत्मौपम्येन सर्वत्र समं पश्यति योऽर्जुन सुखं वा यदि वा दुःखं स योगी परमो मतः.
Yeah. Arjun, he who looks on all as one, on the analogy of his own self, and looks upon the joys and sorrows of all equally, such a yogi is deemed to be the highest of all. Now, for this, Vinoba has given an example. He talks, I am not able to recollect whom. He talks about Namdev or Eknath when he's passing through the village street and he sees a buffalo is being whipped by the master. And then when this sage goes home, he sees all the whip marks on his own back. He has identified so totally with that animal, now he doesn't see it as an animal. We may say it as an animal, but for him, it's nothing but a manifestation of the highest. The life which is there in that, so to say, animal is there in him. And when that being is being beaten up, he is the whip lashes, the marks of the whip are his own back. So he has identified so equally with a being, not an animal being or a human being, but a being. So he looks upon the joys and sorrows of all equally. The joy of another, here is where that Maitri Karuna would come in, where the Mudita, where there is so much of goodwill, where there is friendliness towards one who is happy. There is no jealousy. He looks upon the joys and sorrows of all equally. Samam pashyati. So one slowly elevates oneself to that state where there are no feelings, wrong feelings or of jealousy, of hatred, of envy for the success of another. Of course, one doesn't lose one's mental balance. One continues with one's duties, but one's mind is kind of pure. So I was talking about Chitta Prasadam. It's purity of mind. Chitta Prasadam is nothing but purity of mind. Mahendra sir, would you like to say something on this?
Couple of verses use the term all pervading. Number 1, infinite consciousness. Number 2, whose vision is everywhere, is even who sees me, capital M-E, me. So the all-pervading, infinite consciousness and me. Now these are the terms that have been described of the Supreme Self.
Yeah.
I think when Ashutosh ji was discussing about Paramatma, Atma, God, a little clarification should come here. The self, the other self, and the Supreme Self. Now these are the terms which we must have a little clarification. All pervading, what is all pervading? What is infinite consciousness? whether self is a limited consciousness. This topic has been in discussion for quite long in Upanishad Kal. About 300 years, these things were being discussed, and the answer was that he cannot be described. Once you describe him, you limit him. So he's not limited. So a couple of terms were used to give the concept of, and one of the term is infinite consciousness and all pervading. These are the two terms that have been used for the Supreme Self or the God or the consciousness, whatever. Now this because the answer in that time was neti. Whatever you describe, no, it's not that. He is not that. He is not that. He is not that. Because the moment you describe him, you are binding him with that description only. So he is undescribable. So couple of terms like all-pervading, infinite consciousness has been used for God, which is a concept only. It's an infinite concept.
Yeah.
Now, based upon that concept, how can we work on it? So they have given example of the self and the other self. It's like whatever water you have in the ocean, whatever water you have in the river, and whatever water you have in the glass. There's no difference at all. A very limited Jivatma, Atma, Jivatma, Paramatma. Everything is same. Everything is same. Now, since you have to work on that, and that's the concept only, how to work and adopt into a practical life. The concept of self has been given. So constantly you have to work on the self, which is not different from the other self or the Supreme Self. It's not different at all. There's no difference. Now we can realize this self, keeping the concept of the Supreme Self and the concept of the other self also. So I hope these terms, there are a couple of more terms, 10 or 11 terms that have been used to describe him. But even after that, he remains undescribable. It cannot be described, whatever terms you give. It's a concept, it's an absolute concept. Keeping that concept, we can work. And that's what the concept of self have been imbibed. Now for the self, so many terms have been used. Even Brahma, he said, Aham Brahmasmi. It doesn't mean I'm Brahma. Aham Brahma. Again, I'm talking about the self. See, chapter 10, when you come, Ashaji, he's describing, I am so, I am so, I am so, I am so.
Correct.
And every time he's describing about the self and me. So it's a concept is important. So in mind that or in Chitta, we must establish a concept of self, the other self, and Supreme Self, and they all are same. Now, if we work with this principle, I think we are on the path of progress. I think this concept, these 2-3 terms have been used. So that's why I wanted to have a little clarification, my own view on this.
Yeah, very good, sir. True, sir. Very nice. Even in chapter 15, he's going to talk about Purushottam.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mahendraji, one question.
Sir.
See, when you say it is a concept,
Yes.
the way I understand concepts is that
Yes.
those are ideas, but those may not be experiences.
Correct.
So, but you're saying that infinite consciousness. Now, when you say consciousness, it is something to be experienced, no? Or is it only a concept? Is it only an idea, or can it be experienced?
No, how it can be experienced unless you visualize. How can you visualize? See, nobody has seen this. See, so many things happen in nature nobody has seen.
No, but that is true. But when the Gita says that yogi will become Brahma Bhutam, so he will experience Satchidananda, as Sunilji was saying. Now that is an experience. No?
That experience is beyond. Once you are in that state, you forget. You don't come back from that state until often an example is given, sir. I'll give an example. The example of a pole vault race, the pole vault.
It's
The people run, to cross certain height, they come with their stick, running, and when they reach on the top, it's gone. Where they are going, nobody knows. So that state has been taken to be a concept. Realize that thing. You can't describe that, undescripted. You cannot describe, you can only have your own experiences. And for having that experience, certain tidbits have been given. Consciousness, the Purusha, me, the self, the other self, the Jivatma, the Brahma. So many terms have been used. The only thing is that you have to realize that state, and that is only experience. And it comes automatically. You have to not make effort is certain limit. Once you cross the effort, now that is the state is talking about the that God or the supreme consciousness or eternal bliss also. You see, effort goes.
Right.
It is
No,
the credit for the effort.
Yeah. So that example was beautiful. So it cannot be described, but it can be experienced, that
Yeah.
state.
Yes.
See, that is
With
the
practice,
experience.
with practice.
Even the experience also cannot be described. See, the question that is beyond everything. If you say that I am experienced, I am going to write it. What is experience? Forget. That is also not there.
So,
sir, so shall we end over here? Sorry, because we've crossed the time.
We cross 1 minute.
Yes, but it's a very interesting discussion. Sunilji, can we have it later on?
yeah, we can begin with this in the next class. Absolutely.
On this
Yeah. Let's begin with this in the next class.
12:45 probably. Oh, sorry, 11:45.
What I'm saying is we'll begin with this in next Sunday.
Okay, no worries. So I will try to join in at 11:45. Mostly I will try, but if I don't, please excuse me.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.